Makes Me Want to Holler by Nathan McCall, Chapter 4. W.E. Waters. Before going to that white school, I never considered the beauty and solace of being around my own people, nor had I realized the danger in being away from them. Now, rather than catch a school bus across town to hostile land, I could safely make the 8-block walk from my home to W.E. Waters, where I transferred. At Waters, I found myself once again in the awkward position of being a new kid, an outsider in school. That discomfort stayed with me a few months. It seemed everybody there knew everybody else, and I was the only stranger among them. In truth, many of the students had met only a few months earlier, when the school first opened. Before then, there was no junior high school in Cavalier Manor. The city built Waters, which taught grades 6 through 8, to accommodate the increasing number of school-aged children moving into the rapidly expanding neighborhood. There were probably other motives involved. By building a school in the neighborhood, the city discouraged some black folks from wanting to go to white schools such as the one I had attended. I remained low-key and shy in those first few months, partly because of my new kid status, but mostly because I was still dazed from the trauma of what I'd gone through at that white school. Eventually, the shock thawed and I warmed to the comfort of a friendly environment with friendly faces, friendly black faces. The sights and sounds at the school had a distinctly black feel that I had missed in those months at the white school. During break periods outside, students' transistor radios blared with the booming voice of Hot Dog, a popular, hip-talking DJ who always led into his music sessions with this outrageous chant: "I'm out here on welfare and don't bit mo care. I got my big toe sticking in the wind." Waters posed social challenges that didn't exist at the white school, where blacks were alienated from student life. At Waters, I became more attuned to the charged, incessant hum of students laughing, teasing, flirting, posturing, and chattering loudly while standing at the hall lockers and changing classes. Suddenly, I was surrounded by giggling girls in my class who wanted to know who I was and where I came from. I felt caught off guard, unprepared for the clumsy dating rituals going on around me. The girls seemed so worldly and so much more mature than me. I felt like a bashful nerd. It seemed my shyness only encouraged them to come on stronger. They sent me notes in class asking if I thought so-and-so was cute. They called me on the telephone some evenings and launched the conversations about dating and dances and other things I knew nothing about. Those girls kept me on edge. Part of my nervousness was the awkwardness of early adolescence, that period of self-discovery when kids are introduced to all their imperfections. At Waters, I began to look in the mirror and see a whole new series of physical defects beyond those I had already noticed. God, I thought, had created a terribly flawed human being, one who was too skinny, whose forehead was too big, whose hairline was too high, and whose eyebrows were too thick. Furthermore, as one of my female classmates pointed out, many of my clothes didn't fit right. She walked over to me one morning in class and said, "Gee, that's a big pocket on your shirt." That was one of my favorite shirts until she cracked on me. After that, I never wore that shirt again. I spent that first year at Waters on the sidelines getting acclimated, checking out the social scene, and trying to avoid the critical eyes of the jokers whose favorite pastime was picking people apart from head to toe. Guys sat in the school cafeteria and milled around their lockers in clusters, waiting for people to walk by so they can make fun of their looks and dress. It was a widely practiced art they called joning, a spin-off of the older art of playing the dozens. Good joning required a brutal whip, a sharp tongue, and a thick skin. It usually started with a challenge, an offhand comment about somebody's looks or clothes, followed by a retaliatory response. Once the Jonas session got started, everybody crowded around, listened, and instigated to keep it going. Clearly, there were some underlying issues of self-esteem tied into the obsessive putting down of others, but it wasn't viewed that way at Waters. Guys built respectable reps in the community if they could Joan hard. They made fun of each other's tacky clothes, berated each other's ugly mamas, talked about each other's shabby houses, highlighted any flaw they could find while competing to put each other down. If a dude came to school in high water pants, they Joaned him hard. If somebody's shoes looked funny, they swear they saw him buy them at Pickaway, the cheapest shoe store in town. And Lord knows a funny looking haircut was an open invitation to being Joaned out of school. Look at that nigga's head. His mama must have put a cereal bowl in his head and cut his hair. A lot of guys got tagged with nicknames during Jonan sessions. Gruesome, Spook Dust, Dirty Stink, Sack Eye, Roach, Tweety Bird, Itchy Booty, Butterball. Dudes such as White Mouse, Turkey Buzzard, and Ratman have been Joaned so hard about their resemblance to animals that the names just stuck with them. In the course of fierce Jonas sessions, guys also created nicknames for others based on something silly or stupid they done. A dude who showed up for school one day with a sandwich made of grits and bread had to live with being called Grit Man for the rest of his life. A girl whose arm was contorted from a handicap was dubbed Crowbar. It got cruel and vicious sometimes. It didn't take long after I got the orders for somebody to find a reason to joan on me. I stepped into school one morning wearing some bright red hand-me-down pants and brought hell on myself. A short dude named Cardell Patilio nudged some of his buddies, pointed at me and said loud enough for all the world to hear, "Look at that dude's pants. He must think he's Superman or somebody with them bright red pants on." Before the other dudes could start weighing in, I turned and scooted off. I walked hurriedly down the hall and went straight out of the building. When I got off the school grounds and out of view, I broke into a sprint that would have put track star Carl Lewis to shame. I ran all the way home. When I reached the house, my mother said, "Boy, what you doing home?" Panting, trying to catch my breath, I said, "Mama, they were joning me about my pants." She seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation. She didn't go upside my head or bless me out. She let me change pants and sent me back to school with a signed note explaining why I was tardy. A few years later, when I became part of the hip crowd, I learned to joan hard enough to keep the cats like Cardell Partilio off my case. I never forgot how that little sawed-off, block-headed JCPenney dress bin baby panda humiliated me. I think the fear of being singled out in Joan was one of the main reasons everybody at Waters placed so much emphasis on how they looked and carried themselves. You could be emotionally scarred for life if you got Joan hard enough. To avoid being cracked on, you had to learn what was hip and how to dress. We called it getting clean. When dudes got clean, they wore the latest styles: starch, high-collar shirts, shark-skin pants, and Stacey Adams wingtip shoes. The tags on their clothes revealed that they were shopping in all the hip places. Everybody who was cool shopped at Arthur's Men's Shop on High Street downtown or at Fine Men's Shop at the Mid-City Shopping Center. One of the sharpest dressers at Waters, a guy named Kenny Banks, who was a few grades above me, had the best of everything. He had shark skins in every color, nice knit shirts, and several pairs of Stacey Adams. When Kenny Banks got clean, he wore suits, matching knit shirts, and wide-brim hats to school. He could also dance, shoot hoops well, and fight. The girls in my class gossiped about him all the time and shrieked like groupies when he got near. I scrutinized Kenny Banks and wondered why God favored some people over others. Watching guys like him made me painfully aware of how plain I dressed. I hadn't cared about getting clean at Alfred J. Mapp, where fashion wasn't a major issue with the white kids. My wardrobe consisted of hand-me-down clothes my brothers had outgrown, and 3 pair of pants which I rotated through the week. My mother brought our pants at the Navy Exchange and ordered our other clothes from the Spiegel catalog. I wore buckled, Buster Brown looking shoes that she brought me and prayed that nobody at Waters droned to my feet. There was one style that everybody was able to get with: waves. By then, waves have replaced the straight hair look of the old conks as the men's hairstyle of the day. Guys got waves by applying a lot of grease to their hair, brushing it a lot every day, and putting on a stocking cap at bedtime. If you did it right, the waves looked like breakers in the ocean. Some guys wore waves just on top of their head. Others, like Kenny Banks, found ways to spin their waves swirling in different directions around their entire head. We call that a roundhouse. Of course, all the slick dudes at Waters wore the right kind of sneakers. Nothing but Chuck Taylor Converse All-Stars would do. Converse All-Stars were to us what Air Jordans are to kids today. In fact, the arrival of All-Stars in the 1960s teenage fashion scene may have marked the beginning of young black kids' obsession with sneakers. If a guy wore PF Flyers or some other cheap, off-brand shit his mama bought at some discount store, he was dismissed as a lame. I studied every detail about All-Stars. They came in high tops and low. They came in 2 colors, black and white. The white ones had thin red and blue stripes around them. The high top whites had a large blue star on a round patch attached to the inside ankle. The black high tops also had a blue star on the patch. I even liked the design of the soles and the track they left in the dirt. Everybody who was anybody had All-Stars. My older brothers, Billy, Junie, and Dwight, got newspaper routes and saved their money to buy some. But I had to wait because they cost too much and my foot size was too small. All-Stars only came in certain sizes. Companies then didn't have the good sense to manipulate the children's market the way they do today. Since Dwight's foot size was only slightly larger than mine, I tried on his All-Stars a lot and admired myself in the mirror at home. The hip dudes profiled in their All-Stars and pimped down the hallway at school like they owned this white man's world. The pimp was a proud, defiant, bouncy stride. You take a regular step with one leg, to sort of hop or drag the other on the second step. At Waters, the best pimpers twisted their torsos slightly and swung their arms in unison with that hop. It made guys look cool and tough. Kenny Banks pimped so hard he looked crippled when he walked. Instead of hopping upward on the second step like most guys, Kenny sort of jerked to the side like his leg was hurt. The pimp was essential, even to Lil Man, whose family moved in across the street from us. One of Lil Man's legs was much shorter than the other. Sometimes he wore a special shoe with an extra thick sole to even the short leg with the long one. He didn't like wearing the special shoe because it made him look handicapped. Most of the time, he just wore regular shoes and converted his hobble into a serious pimp. The only problem was, when Lil Man stood still, he had to tiptoe on a short leg or wrestle on an elevated curb with the long leg in the street. Likewise, guys who had bad feet could pimp in a way that made their deformity look halfway cool. My Aunt Iris in New York once told me a theory about the origin of the pimp. She said it was handed down through the generations from the slavery days. As she explained it, some slaves were forced to walk with a ball and chain attached to one ankle. When they walked, they took a regular step with the free leg and sort of hopped on the other to drag the heavy ball and chain. I have no idea if this is true. I just know the pimp has always been around and accepted as something every dude learns to do, like riding a bicycle and playing basketball. I eventually realized that there were only 2 types of dudes at Waters: solitary lames like me and those who got into the slick in crowd. The slickest among these guys were the older dudes, the thugs, who ran the school and hung in the streets. They were the most popular. They got all the attention from the fly girls. They set the standard for hip and cool at Waters, and everybody else followed suit. They dragged long and hard on cigarettes in the boys' bathroom and ceremoniously passed them among themselves like it was no big thing. When they were standing around in there, they constantly cuffed their crotches as if they were clutching organs so heavy they might bust through their pants. They often fought in school and cut classes. I learned a lot by watching them. They were lovers. They had strong rap games. The studied ability to talk smooth and persuasive to get their way with the ladies. Most of the time they were jiving, lying to girls about how much they liked them, repeating romantic lyrics from songs they heard on the radio. As phony as it sounded, it worked. They got the finest babes in school just by telling them what they thought the girls wanted to hear. One guy followed girls through the hall all the time, begging for their telephone numbers. "Baby, you know I'm for real. When you gonna give me that number? Why don't you let me come over and see you sometimes, huh? Huh? I was captivated by these guys. They seemed to have all the self-confidence I lacked. I was in honors rolls and spelling bees. They were in sock hops and talent shows. I looked all neat and boring, like my mama dressed me for school. They looked exciting. They wore their hats backwards and left their belt buckles unfastened and shoelaces untied. I stood around the schoolyard sometimes after classes, studying them, listening to their lyrical slang, which they spiced heavily with curse words. I learned all their nicknames: Lil Joe, Joe Ham, Skinny Pimp, Baby Joe. The most popular among the thugs was a guy named Jerome Gary. His buddies nicknamed him Scooby D and called him Scoob for short. He lived with his family in one of the older sections of the neighborhood. My brother Dwight had told me about Scoob a few years before I first saw him. I could tell from the sense of awe and wonder when Dwight talked about Scoob that he revered the guy. Without even seeing him, I admired him too, and envied Dwight for having the chance to see him live and in person every day in school. Scoob stood out from the other hoods because he was super bad, meaning he took flack from no man, black or white. He had a medium build, bronze skin, flaming red hair, and a sizzling hot temper to match. When I transferred to Waters, Scoob was a 9th grader there, 3 years ahead of me. He practically ran the school. Everybody, teachers and girls included, feared and respected him. Scoob was no hellraiser with his hands, but he had more heart than anybody I'd seen. When he lost his temper, he'd take on anybody and will himself to win. He eventually became known among blacks throughout Portsmouth as the baddest cat to come out of Cavalier Manor. Scoob had an older brother, Arnold, a stocky knockout artist. The two of them double bank guys when they got into fights. Arnold was as cool as Scoob was bad. He had a pair of black high-top All-Stars, which he laced with 2 pair of shoestrings, one black, one white. He wore his All-Stars with thick sweat socks and pushed his pants legs up, giving them a disheveled look. He left the laces untied and let the tongue of his sneakers droop just so. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Arnold had a unique pimp too. He took the first short step, then paused longer than the normal pause for a pimp, then took his hop real slow. It was a brazen pimp that said, "I know I'm bad." Scoob and Arnold set the standard for manliness in Cavalier Manor. Guys talked about their street exploits and their persuasive charm with girls. Dudes studied them like school books and imitated their walks and the lipsy way they talked. Whenever I saw Scoob in the hallways at school, I'd stand off to the side and watch, drinking in every detail about him. I remember the first time Scoob spoke to me. One day, when my grandmother Bamboo sent me to the 7-Eleven, I saw his buddies and him hanging around in front of the store. After I came out, I hung around nearby listening to them talk. Scoob saw me gazing admiringly at him and infused in me the fear of God. He walked over, looked deep into my eyes, and asked sincerely, "Don't you think pussy stinks?" I was shocked that he had said something to me. I was dazed, like the fan who's touched the hem of a rock star's garment. I tried to come up with a way to respond without revealing myself as a no-name lame, but the words stuck in my throat like a chicken bone. So I just stood there, wide-eyed, tongue-tied, and paralyzed. I went away that day bewildered still by the question he'd asked, but proud to have been acknowledged by a hero. After watching the older cats, I knew I had to work on getting my act together. Shyness or not, I had to break into the social scene or risk being victimized in some way by it. My coming out, of sorts, was sparked by a simple summertime birthday party I was invited to at the home of one of my classmates. I wouldn't have gone were it not for Denise Wilson, who was a bronze-skinned cutie with pretty green eyes and long sandy hair. She and I had started sending each other heart-shaped love notes in class before the school year ended. With much prodding from other classmates, I had sent her a note asking if I could have a chance. I had no idea what I wanted the chance to do. That was what people at Water said when they wanted to date someone, so I said it too. Denise had said yes, and we started our summer vacation as boyfriend and girlfriend and dated mostly on the telephone. I had no intention of going to the party until Denise pressured me. Going to that party would be risky. Many of my classmates would be there, and everybody would be watching everybody else to see who could or couldn't dance. If I danced and didn't do well, I'd get joned hard. All that school year, I avoided the Friday sock hops in the gym for that very reason. I'd peek in, then dash for fear that one of the girls from my class might see me and ask me to dance. Dancing was a big thing at Waters and everywhere else. The Temptations, the Supremes, and the Four Tops were hot, and the dances done to their tunes, the Shingling, the Turtle, the Horse, were smooth. When Marvin Gaye came out with his hit tune, I heard it through the grapevine. Everybody was doing a dance called the dump. You take 3 steps, then lean down low and pause. It was real slick. My brother Billy was a dancer in our family. He could watch a dance one time, catch on, and modify it so smoothly that people would crowd around and watch him when he did his thing. I studied Billy when his teenage friends came to the house and played 45s and danced in the den. Then I practiced alone in the bedroom when nobody was looking. I learned to do the dump, but was too shy to try it in public with a girl. I was most afraid of being asked to slow grind. That required grabbing a girl, holding her close, and moving your 2 entangled bodies in harmony with the music. I had never held a girl before. I was scared that if I tried, my dancing partner might see I didn't know what I was doing, or some other dude might see my clumsiness and start joning me in the middle of the floor. The most popular slow song of the day was a love ballad by the Dells called Stay in My Corner, one of the longest slow songs recorded up to that point. People who knew how to slow grind loved that song because it gave them an excuse to hold each other real close for a long time. On the day of the party, I got dressed in an orange bandline shirt and my favorite plaid pants. Although the midsummer heat was scorching outside, I put on an extra pair of pants beneath the plaid ones to make me look bigger. When I got there, the sounds of the Temptations filled the living room. My classmates ambled about, talking and sipping soda from paper party cups. I spotted Denise and stood alone with her, pinned to the wall near the punch bowl, scared to death. As the music blared and people gigged out on the dance floor, I pretended to get so deep into conversation with Denise that I didn't have time to groove. Several times she popped her fingers and said, "Come on, let's dance." Each time I begged off and headed for the punch bowl. Not right now. At some point during the party, the birthday girl's older brother and some of his friends, they all seemed gigantic, came into the house and started loud talking to wallflowers. "Why ain't you little niggas dancing with these girls? We gonna pry all the wallflowers off the walls and force them to dance." That threat inspired everybody. A slow record was played. One by one, guys paired off with girls and took them onto the dance floor. Denise glanced at me. I waited until the dance floor was nearly filled, then, in the act of sheer will and faith, popped the question, "Denise, you want to dance?" "Yeah, I'll dance with you." I pulled her into the middle of the floor in the thick of the crowd so that no one would be able to see us clearly. Not knowing quite where to put my hands, I held her loosely and tried to follow her body movements. I was sweating like crazy. I was nervous, and the heat from the 2 pair of pants I was wearing had set my butt on fire. My lips grew parched and my palms got moist. I was stiff as a board, but my knees quivered so much I thought I might collapse. I'm sure Denise felt me trembling. As we swayed to the music, I looked around the dance floor and saw other guys talking easily with their partners as they danced. A few others seemed uptight like me. The Dells were crooning, "Stay in My Corner." As the song played on, I focused on the 2-step rhythm of the slow grind and followed the movements of Denise's body, concentrating hard to make sure I didn't mess up. After I caught on, it was fun, and I was surprised to find that it felt so good. When the song ended, I walked with Denise back to the punch bowl and breathed a deep, deep sigh of relief. I felt like I had accomplished something major, and I had done it without once stepping on Denise's feet. As I headed back toward the wall, I thought, that was nice. It made me realize that maybe a lot of the social situations that had intimidated me before might not be so bad after all. I survived that party and went on months later to learn to slow grind like a champ. Once I learned, you couldn't get me off the dance floor, especially when they played "Stay in My Corner."